It's a sunny morning in the city, but inside the towering glass building, everything feels different. The usual hum of productivity echoes through the halls, but there's an undercurrent of tension that the employees don't notice. No one suspects that the man who's been quietly walking through the offices, observing everything, is the CEO himself. This isn't just any CEO. This is Marcus Thomas, a black man who rose from the streets to become one of the most successful businessmen in the country. He's an enigma in a world where CEOs don't look like him, and he's used to blending into the background, playing the part of the invisible man in a world full of high society suits and starched collars. Today, he's not wearing a suit. He's not wearing a tie. Today, he's dressed like any other janitor. And he's watching. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Marcus had always known his company was filled with employees working for a paycheck, but he never realized how deep the apathy ran, until now. He wanted to understand. He wanted to see how the workers really felt. He wanted to hear their stories without the polished corporate facade. But then, as he's making his rounds, cleaning the same hallways he's walked down 1,000 times, he sees something that stops him in his tracks. There, in the corner of the office, is Tony. Tony is the janitor, a man who's always been quiet, always kept to himself. Marcus had passed him in the hall countless times, nodded a quick hello, maybe even exchanged a few polite words. But this time, Tony isn't working. He isn't cleaning. He isn't doing his job. He's sitting there, in the corner, shoulders shaking as silent tears run down his face. Marcus' heart sinks. He's never seen Tony like this. This man is the embodiment of stoicism. He never complains, never asks for anything. Yet here he is, vulnerable, broken. What's happening? This was supposed to be just another ordinary day. A day to observe. But what he's witnessing, what he's about to uncover, will change everything. The tears aren't just from stress or frustration. No, there's something much deeper, something Marcus couldn't have imagined. As he stands there, paralyzed, watching Tony's pain unravel, he knows one thing. There's more to this than meets the eye. Much more. And that's when Marcus realizes. He's in the middle of a story he never expected. A story that will make him question everything he's ever known about the people he works with, about the world he's built, and ultimately about himself. Before we dive deeper into this revelation, take a moment to like this video and comment below with your thoughts. And if you're as curious as I am to find out what happens next, subscribe and follow us on this journey together. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. Marcus stands there, frozen, staring at Tony in disbelief. The janitor is hunched over, his hands clutching his knees, his head buried in his chest. His back trembles with each sob, a man who has clearly reached his breaking point. It's a sight Marcus never expected to witness, especially not in the midst of the hustle and bustle of a corporate world that prides itself on order, professionalism, and success. But in this moment, none of that matters. All Marcus can think about is the broken man in front of him, the one who's always been the quiet worker, the one who always stayed out of the spotlight. Tony never asked for recognition. He never complained. He was just there, doing his job day in and day out, invisible to most of the people around him. But now, in his most vulnerable state, it's clear he's far from invisible. What happened to you, Tony? Marcus is torn. He knows he shouldn't intrude on the man's personal pain. But something inside of him, something deep, something primal, compels him to move forward. He steps closer, cautiously, as if approaching a wounded animal. Tony! His voice is low, barely a whisper. He isn't sure if the janitor even hears him. Tony's shoulders shudder. Slowly, he looks up. His eyes are red, bloodshot, and full of a sorrow that's far too deep for a simple apology or excuse. There's a heaviness in his gaze, a weariness that stretches far beyond the physical exhaustion of his daily duties. For the first time, Marcus notices the wear and tear on Tony's face, the dark circles under his eyes, the deep lines of stress that have etched themselves into his skin. It's like looking at a man who's been carrying an unbearable weight for far too long, and it's finally breaking him. "Are you okay?" Marcus asks, his voice faltering. Tony stares at him for a moment, almost as if he's trying to process the question. His lips tremble, but he says nothing. Instead, he slowly shakes his head, the tears continuing to flow, unchecked. I can't do this anymore, Marcus. The words hang in the air, heavy and painful. Tony's voice cracks, and Marcus feels his stomach twist. He wants to reach out to comfort the man, but he doesn't know how. He's never been one to show weakness. He's been conditioned to be strong, to hide his emotions, to push through no matter what. But in this moment, looking at Tony, he realizes how little he truly understands about the people he employs, the ones who make the company run while he sits at the top. Tony continues, his voice shaking. I've been working here for years, and no one ever notices. No one cares. They walk by me like I'm invisible. I clean up their messes. I pick up after them. I do everything they ask. And for what? His voice rises, but it's filled with a quiet rage, not directed at Marcus, but at the system, at the people who take his work for granted, at the world that never saw him. It's like I don't even exist. I'm just here to clean up their messes, and that's all I'll ever be. His words are like daggers, piercing through Marcus's carefully constructed facade. Marcus's heart aches. He's never understood the depth of Tony's struggles, the silent battle that plays out behind the scenes, the shame, the frustration, the feeling of being overlooked, invisible. Tony looks down at the floor, as if ashamed of his outburst. But Marcus can't let it go. He needs to understand. He has to know what's really going on. Tony, I had no idea. Marcus's voice is barely audible now. He's struggling to keep his composure. What can I do? How can I help? Tony wipes his face with the back of his hand, sniffing. It's not about what you can do for me, Marcus. It's about what you can do for all of us. The ones you don't see. It's a simple statement, but it cuts through Marcus like a knife. He doesn't know what to say. He wants to apologize, to fix things, but he realizes that words aren't enough. This is bigger than just one conversation. This is about the systemic issues that run deep in the company and in society itself. The way people like Tony are treated. The way they're pushed to the sidelines, expected to serve without ever being seen. And that realization hits him hard. Marcus knows he's been living in a bubble that's been carefully constructed around him as he climbed to the top. But now he's seeing the cracks. Now he's realizing how much he's missed, how much he's ignored, and he's starting to feel the weight of it all. Marcus stands frozen, still trying to process what Tony has just shared. The weight of Tony's words sinks into his chest, each one heavier than the last. For the first time in his life, he's forced to look beyond the polished corporate world he's spent years cultivating and confront the reality that so many of the people around him, his employees, are suffering in silence. He's been so focused on his rise to the top that he never truly took the time to understand the struggles of the people below him. Sure, he saw them. He acknowledged their presence. But did he really see them? Did he really understand the sacrifices they make every single day? Did he ever stop to think about the emotional toll it takes to work in a world that treats you like a cog in a machine? Tony's words echo in his mind, and suddenly, everything feels off. How many others are like Tony? How many others have been quietly carrying the weight of their own struggles, feeling invisible and unheard, while Marcus and the rest of the leadership team continue to operate in a bubble of privilege and success? He's had it all: luxury, status, influence. But Tony has had nothing but pain and neglect, and Marcus only now understands how deeply that neglect has affected him. His mind races. He's never been one to shy away from hard work. But this is different. This isn't a matter of putting in extra hours or pushing through the discomfort of building something successful. This is about understanding people. It's about realizing the human cost of ambition. I don't know what to say. Marcus mutters, his words barely escaping his lips. He's not just lost for words, he's lost for direction. What can he say in the face of so much hurt? How do you fix something so ingrained in the system? Tony looks up at him, his eyes tired but searching. There's a sadness in them, but also something else. A glimmer of hope. He's not asking for sympathy, and he's certainly not expecting Marcus to have all the answers. But what he's saying in his quiet way is that the system needs to change. It's not enough to just do better for one person. It has to be better for everyone. I don't want your pity, Marcus, Tony says, his voice steady but strained. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. But you need to see the truth. People like me, we're invisible. We're not seen for what we do. We're just here to clean up the mess and then disappear. It's not just the work, Marcus. It's the way we're treated. The way we're forgotten. It's the way the world sees us. And it's the way we start seeing ourselves. Marcus swallows hard. He never thought about it like that. Never thought about the long-term effects of being overlooked, of having no voice. He thought that success was about ambition, hard work, and results. But Tony's words have shifted that perspective completely. Maybe I've been blind, Marcus admits, his voice thick with emotion. I've been so focused on my own journey, my own climb, that I never stopped to ask what it costs to get to the top. I never thought about how much you and the others sacrifice just to make sure everything keeps running. Tony shakes his head slowly, his eyes sad but understanding. It's not your fault, Marcus. You didn't create this world. But you're in a position to change it. You're at the top. People listen to you. They'll follow you. And if you do something different, if you lead differently, they'll follow you into something better. Marcus stares at him, feeling a pang of guilt mixed with a strange sense of clarity. What Tony is saying is true. Marcus has the power to change things, not just for Tony, but for everyone in the company. He can use his position of privilege to amplify the voices that have been silenced for too long. But it's not going to be easy. Change never is. As he stands there, processing the enormity of what he's just learned, Marcus realizes that his next steps won't just define his future as a CEO. They'll define the kind of man he truly wants to be. Marcus sits at his desk in the executive suite, the city sprawling out beneath him, but his mind is a million miles away. The view from the top, the one that had once filled him with pride, now seems hollow. The skyline that once symbolized success now feels like a cold, distant monument to everything he's overlooked. His fingers tap absently on the edge of the desk, but his thoughts are consumed by Tony, the janitor with a broken heart, the man who's spent years serving silently, swallowed by a system that has failed him. Every word Tony spoke echoes in Marcus's mind, and he can't shake the feeling that everything he's worked for, everything he's achieved, has come at a cost he never fully understood. What now? Marcus leans back in his chair, rubbing his forehead, exhaustion seeping into his bones. He's been running on autopilot for so long, but now the autopilot has failed him. He can't continue pretending like everything is fine. He can't continue just putting out fires and ignoring the foundation that's burning beneath his feet. His phone buzzes on the desk, a notification from his assistant. He doesn't even glance at it. He knows what it says. Another meeting, another agenda, another important decision to make about the company's direction. But none of it seems important anymore, not in the way it used to. He runs his hands through his hair and stares at the window, watching the cars below. He thinks about the employees, about the countless Tonys that fill his building, their stories buried behind the sterile walls and faceless procedures. He thinks about the way they're treated, the way they're forgotten. They show up, do their job, and leave. But Marcus has never really seen them, not like this. He's been blind, and he's not sure if he can continue to turn a blind eye. In his gut, Marcus feels the tug of responsibility, the weight of the realization that he's in a position to change something. A deep part of him knows he has to do something, that this is his moment to define what kind of leader he will be. But the question hangs in the air. What should he do? There's a small part of him, the part that's driven by the desire to win, that tells him to just move on, to put the pain of his employees out of his mind and keep pushing forward with the company's goals. After all, isn't that what it takes to succeed? To do whatever is necessary, regardless of the cost. But as he sits there, lost in thought, Marcus knows that he's already paid the price for success. He's paid it with the silence of the people who have served him. He's paid it with the absence of empathy in a world that rewards profit over people. This can't be it. He stands up abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished floor, the sound sharp in the otherwise silent room. Marcus walks to the window, looking down at the city below. He can feel the weight of Tony's words pulling at his soul. People like me, we're invisible. Marcus's chest tightens, and for the first time, he feels the full gravity of what it means to be truly seen, and what it costs when people are ignored. What is the price of ignoring the invisible? He doesn't have all the answers, but he knows one thing. If he continues down this path, nothing will change. Tony will remain invisible. The others will remain silent. The system will keep churning out broken people, discarded and unseen. But if he chooses to take action, to challenge everything he's known about leadership and success, if he dares to be the kind of CEO who sees his people not as tools but as human beings, maybe, just maybe, he can change the system from the inside out. But it won't be easy. It won't be without consequences. People will question his decisions. His board will protest. The old ways will fight back. But in the end, Marcus realizes this is no longer about him. It's about creating a legacy that actually means something. A legacy of real leadership. Leadership that sees and values every person, not just the ones who wear suits and sit in boardrooms. Marcus picks up his phone, his fingers trembling as he makes the call. It's time to face the music. "Call Tony," he says, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. He has no idea what he's going to say yet, but he knows it's time to start something new. It's time to step into a new role. The role of a leader who leads with empathy, with understanding, and with courage. It's time to listen. Marcus is standing at a crossroads. The choices he makes now will define his future and the future of his company. Like this video if you believe in the power of change. Comment what you think Marcus should do next, and don't forget to subscribe to see what happens next in this unfolding journey. Marcus feels the weight of the phone in his hand as it rings, the seconds ticking by like minutes. His heart races. He's nervous. But more than anything, he's terrified. Terrified of what he's about to say, terrified of what Tony might say, terrified of the change he's about to set in motion. The phone rings again, and Marcus wonders for the briefest moment if he should hang up. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe it's too soon. Maybe Tony doesn't want to hear from him. But then Tony answers. "Hello." The sound of his voice, the quiet strength in it, the underlying pain, makes Marcus's heart ache. He doesn't know what to say. He's never been one to feel like this. He's always been in control, always had the answers. But now, facing the man whose world he's just realized is so very different from his own, he feels lost. "Tony, it's Marcus." His voice cracks a little, and he immediately feels vulnerable. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about what's been happening." There's a long pause on the other end of the line, and Marcus can practically hear Tony's mind working. But then, Tony speaks, his tone guarded but calm. "I didn't expect you to call," Tony says softly. "I didn't expect you to really care." The words hit Marcus harder than he expected. He knows they're not meant to be accusatory, but they cut deep nonetheless. "I do care," Marcus says quickly, almost too quickly, "and I think I've been blind to what's been going on, to what you've been going through. I don't have all the answers, but I want to listen. I want to understand. And I want to make things right." Tony is silent for a moment, and Marcus holds his breath. He doesn't know if Tony believes him. He doesn't know if he'll be willing to share his pain with him. Not after everything that's happened. But then Tony speaks, his voice low but steady. "Why now?" Marcus's chest tightens at the question. He's asked himself the same thing 100 times. Why now? Why is he finally waking up to this? Why has it taken him so long to see the truth? "I don't know," Marcus admits. "Maybe I've been too caught up in my own world to notice what's happening in yours. But I know now, and I don't want to just fix things. I want to change things. For everyone." There's another pause on the line, and Marcus can hear the faint sound of Tony exhaling, as if he's processing what Marcus has just said. "You want to change things?" Tony repeats. "You really mean that?" "Yes," Marcus says, his voice firm now, filled with determination. "I'm ready to make a change, a real one, and I need you to help me do that. I want to create a place where people like you, people who've been overlooked, can finally be seen. Where no one has to feel invisible anymore. The words hang in the air, heavy and charged with the weight of everything they represent. Marcus has no idea what this journey will look like. He doesn't know where it will take him, or what kind of backlash he'll face from his board, his employees, or even his own conscience. But he knows one thing for sure: he's not turning back. I don't know what that looks like, Marcus continues, his voice more vulnerable now. But I want to start somewhere. I need to start somewhere. And I want you to be a part of that. Tony's silence on the other end of the line is deafening, but Marcus doesn't push. He waits, letting the weight of his words settle in. He wants to give Tony the space to process, to decide if he's willing to take this step with him. Finally, Tony speaks again, his voice softer now, tinged with something close to hope. I don't know if I can trust you yet, Tony admits, but I'm willing to give you a chance. It's not a declaration of full trust, but it's a start. It's a step in the right direction, and Marcus feels something inside him shift. The road ahead won't be easy, but they've both taken the first step. I won't let you down, Tony, Marcus says, his voice steady with newfound purpose. I promise you that. Marcus couldn't sleep that night. The conversation with Tony kept replaying in his mind, but it wasn't just the words that haunted him. It was the promise. Promise to change. Promise to make things better. But what does better even look like? He had spent years working in a world that valued numbers, results, and productivity. That's how he built his empire, brick by brick. But now, those same principles seemed hollow. Now, the people, their stories, their struggles, had become the foundation of what he wanted to build. And he knew it wouldn't be easy. The next morning, Marcus called a meeting with his top executives. It wasn't the usual meeting filled with quarterly numbers, upcoming mergers, and future strategies. This time, he had something different in mind. As the team settled into their seats around the polished conference table, the atmosphere felt tense. The executives exchanged glances, whispering among themselves. They had no idea what this meeting was about. The usual air of confidence was replaced with a subtle undercurrent of curiosity and confusion. Thank you for joining on such short notice, Marcus began, standing at the head of the table. He could feel the weight of his words as he spoke them. This wasn't just another corporate strategy session. This was a shift, a pivot that would challenge everything they thought they knew about leadership. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Marcus continued, and I've realized something. Our company, the one I've built, it's missing something. It's missing heart. It's missing empathy. We've been focusing on the wrong things, on profits, on growth, on scaling, but we've lost sight of the people who make all of that possible. The room went silent. The executives exchanged puzzled looks. Marcus could see their skepticism in their eyes. They had spent years building a culture of high performance, high expectations, and high rewards. But this was something entirely different. One of the senior executives, James, spoke up first, his voice thick with disbelief. Marcus, with all due respect, I don't think I understand, James said. Are you suggesting we stop focusing on growth and profitability? Our entire business model is built around those things. If we shift our focus now, what does that mean for our future? Marcus felt a wave of frustration, but he kept his calm. This was going to be harder than he thought. Changing a company's culture wasn't going to be a quick fix. It would take time, patience, and a lot of hard conversations. But Marcus wasn't backing down. I'm not saying we stop growing, Marcus responded. What I'm saying is we grow differently. We grow by putting people first, by seeing the people behind the numbers. We build a company that values empathy, inclusion, and respect for every single employee, not just the ones at the top. The room was filled with uncomfortable silence. Marcus could feel the resistance building. His executives weren't used to thinking this way. They were conditioned to prioritize the bottom line, to see employees as assets to be optimized rather than people to be supported. James leaned forward, his tone defensive. Marcus, we're running a business here, not a charity. You can't just expect everyone to start feeling good about their work. At the end of the day, people get paid to do a job, and the results speak for themselves. Marcus's jaw clenched. He knew this was coming. He had expected resistance, but hearing it come from James someone he had trusted for years, stung. "I know what this company has been built on, James," Marcus said, his voice steady but firm. "But what I've realized is that this system, the one that rewards only results and ignores everything else, it's broken. People aren't just numbers. They're human beings. And if we don't start seeing that, we'll lose everything we've worked for. We'll lose the very thing that makes this company great." There was a long pause, the tension in the room palpable. The rest of the executives were silent, their expressions unreadable. Marcus could feel their skepticism, their unwillingness to let go of the old way of doing things. They weren't ready for this conversation, not yet. But he wasn't about to back down. "This isn't just about Tony," Marcus said, his voice softening, but still filled with conviction. "It's about all of us. It's about creating a culture where every single person, from the janitor to the CEO, feels seen, heard, and valued. It's about realizing that the people we often overlook are the ones who make this company tick. They deserve our respect. They deserve our support." The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus could feel the weight of their stares, their judgment, their disbelief. This was the beginning of something much bigger than he'd anticipated. The path he was choosing wasn't going to be easy. It was going to be filled with pushback, resistance, and difficult decisions. But he was ready. He looked at his team, each of them seated in front of him, their faces a mixture of confusion, doubt, and uncertainty. He knew the road ahead would be long, and the change he was advocating for wouldn't come quickly. But Marcus had made his decision. He wasn't just going to lead the company. He was going to transform it, from the inside out. The days following the meeting with his executives were a blur for Marcus. What he had hoped would be the beginning of something transformative quickly turned into a series of uphill battles. The executives, once his trusted allies, were now questioning him at every turn. The board meetings were filled with objections, and there was a palpable sense of unease whenever Marcus spoke about his vision for change. He had expected resistance, but not this level of pushback. It was like he had opened a floodgate of uncertainty, and now he was struggling to keep the tide from swallowing him whole. He had always been a man who thrived in adversity, but this was different. This wasn't just about numbers or market share. It was about something deeper, something personal. This was about changing the very culture of the company, and Marcus was realizing that the task ahead was monumental. One morning, Marcus sat in his office, going through his emails when he noticed a message from his assistant. It was a meeting request from James, his right-hand man. Marcus had known James for years. They had been through countless challenges together, weathering storms and making difficult decisions. But now Marcus wasn't sure what to expect. He opened the email, feeling a knot form in his stomach. The subject line read, "Urgent, discussion about recent changes." The feeling in his chest tightened. He had no idea what James wanted to talk about, but given the tone of the company's recent meetings, he knew it wouldn't be easy. Marcus clicked on the calendar invite. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. He decided to prepare for the worst. At exactly 2 p.m., James walked into his office, his expression guarded. He closed the door behind him, and Marcus motioned for him to sit. "Marcus," James began, his voice low but firm, "we need to talk." Marcus gestured for him to continue, trying to read the tension in James's body language. "I've been going through some things with the board," James started, "and I need to be honest with you. Your vision for the company, it's not sitting well with everyone." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had expected resistance, but this was different. He had no idea how deep the opposition really went. "The board feels like this whole people-first approach is a distraction. They're worried about the market response, about our profitability," James continued. "They think this is going to hurt our bottom line. And to be honest, Marcus, I'm starting to wonder if they're right." Marcus's pulse quickened. "You too?" he asked quietly, feeling a pang of betrayal. He had always trusted James, but now he was starting to doubt everything. "I'm not saying I don't believe in what you're trying to do," James said, his voice filled with hesitation. "But you need to understand, this company wasn't built on empathy. It was built on hard work, on pushing boundaries, and on maximizing profits. If we start focusing too much on feelings, we risk losing everything. Marcus stared at him for a long moment, trying to process what he was hearing. He had never imagined that James, of all people, would question his decision. "Are you telling me we should go back to the way things were?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with emotion. "After everything I've seen, after everything I've learned, you want me to turn my back on what I know is right?" James didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Marcus, his face clouded with uncertainty. "What I'm saying is that we can't change everything overnight. You can't expect people to embrace this new vision just because you want it. Change takes time. And right now, the company is in danger. We're not just fighting for success anymore, we're fighting to survive." Marcus stood up, walking toward the window, his mind racing. He had never felt so torn. He had a vision, one he believed in with everything he had. But was he willing to risk everything, including the future of the company, for that vision? "I can't go back," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't unsee what I've seen. I can't forget what Tony said, what all of them are going through. I won't go back to a company that only cares about numbers. I want to build something that matters, something that sees people as more than just assets." James sighed, clearly frustrated but also understanding. "I get it, Marcus. I do. But you have to realize that not everyone is ready for this. Not everyone is willing to follow you into this new world. There are people out there who think you've lost your way, who think this is just a phase." Marcus turned to face James, his eyes filled with resolve. "Then I'll show them. I'll prove that this is the way forward. We can have both profit and people. We don't have to choose one over the other. It's time for a change, James. A real one." James didn't respond right away. He just sat there, silently, as if weighing the implications of Marcus's words. Finally, he stood up, his expression unreadable. "You've always been the risk-taker, Marcus," James said quietly. "I'll support you whatever happens. But you need to understand that this won't be easy. The road ahead is going to be filled with obstacles." "I'm ready," Marcus said, his voice firm. James nodded, but the doubt in his eyes was impossible to ignore. As he walked out of the office, Marcus was left alone with his thoughts. The pushback was only just beginning. The company he had built, the empire that had been his life's work, was now at a crossroads. And Marcus knew that no matter what happened next, there would be no turning back. The tension is rising, and Marcus is about to face even greater challenges. Will he be able to convince his team and the board to embrace his vision, or will the resistance be too much to overcome? Like this video if you believe Marcus's vision is worth fighting for, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to see what happens next in this journey. The days after his conversation with James were a blur of meetings, arguments, and second-guessing. Marcus's vision for change was being questioned on every front, from the boardroom to the break room. The pushback was relentless, and the pressure was starting to take its toll. At first, Marcus had believed that all it would take was a clear vision and determination to change the culture. He thought that by simply showing people the value of empathy and inclusion, they would see the light. But now, he was starting to realize just how deeply entrenched the old ways were. The company's culture wasn't just a set of rules or guidelines, it was a way of life. It was the lens through which everyone viewed the world, and challenging that lens was like trying to rewrite the very fabric of the company. His phone buzzed on his desk, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was another email from the board, another warning, another criticism. His stomach churned as he read the message, the words blurring together in frustration. They were losing confidence in him, and it was becoming clear that if he didn't make a change soon, he would be out of a job. Marcus leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The stress was starting to build. He hadn't slept properly in days, his mind constantly spinning with the weight of his decisions. He wanted to believe that this fight was worth it, that his vision for a more compassionate, human-centered company would eventually win out. But every day felt like another battle, another setback. He thought about Tony, about the tears he had seen in the janitor's eyes. He thought about all the other employees who were still struggling in silence, unseen, unheard. And in those moments, his resolve would harden again. He had to keep pushing forward. For them. For the people who didn't have a voice, who didn't have the luxury of making decisions from the top floor. But the reality of it was this: Marcus was fighting an uphill battle. And as the pressure mounted, he began to feel the strain. The next day, Marcus stood at the front of a meeting with his leadership team, the atmosphere heavy with tension. The executives were visibly frustrated, and the board members had grown more hostile. Every word Marcus spoke was met with resistance, every suggestion dismissed as naive or unrealistic. Felt like he was drowning in opposition. "I've said it before and I'll say it again," Marcus said, his voice low but steady, trying to maintain control. "Our focus needs to shift. We can't keep operating under this outdated model that only values profits. We need to put people first. It's the only way we'll survive in the future." James, sitting across from him, didn't even look up from his notes. He wasn't listening anymore. He was just waiting for the meeting to end. "You're asking us to change everything, Marcus," James finally said, his tone sharp. "You're asking us to rewrite the very rules that made this company successful. That's not just risky, it's reckless." Marcus took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'm not asking you to change everything overnight. I'm asking you to start thinking about people, not just numbers. We can still be profitable, we can still grow, but we need to do it in a way that values our employees." There was a long pause, and then another executive, Sarah, spoke up, her voice filled with frustration. "This isn't sustainable, Marcus," Sarah said. "You're asking us to abandon the values that have been the foundation of this company for years. You can't build a business on ideals alone. You need results. You need performance. People want to work for a company that's successful, not a company that spends all its time worrying about feelings." Marcus felt the heat rise in his chest. It was clear that no one in the room was willing to hear him. No one was willing to acknowledge that the company's approach needed to change. He had spent months trying to convince them, trying to show them the value of his vision, but it felt like he was talking to a brick wall. "You don't get it, do you?" Marcus said, his voice rising slightly. "This isn't just about feelings. This is about creating a sustainable future. This is about building a company where people feel valued, where they can thrive, where they can be more than just cogs in a machine. If we don't start seeing the human side of our business, we will lose our people, our culture, and eventually our market position." But it was no use. The room was filled with dead silence, each person weighed down by the gravity of the conversation. Marcus knew this battle wasn't going to be won in a single meeting. He had known that from the start. But he hadn't expected it to be this difficult, this divisive. The weight of his decisions felt unbearable. Finally, James stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're asking too much, Marcus," he said, his voice colder than before. "I think we're done here." As James walked out of the room, the tension lingered in the air like smoke. Marcus felt the weight of the meeting crash down on him. He was losing his team. He was losing their trust. And yet, something inside him refused to give up. He couldn't turn back now. The days after the meeting were a blur of tension and doubt. Marcus spent long hours in his office, trying to stay focused, but the weight of the mounting resistance was overwhelming. His phone constantly buzzed with messages. Emails from the board questioning his decisions. Text messages from close colleagues expressing their concerns. Everyone seemed to be turning against him. The more he tried to push forward, the more the pushback grew, like a tidal wave crashing over him. And then, just as Marcus thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. It was late one evening when he received a call from his assistant. "Marcus, I need to let you know," she said, her voice tense. "There's a meeting scheduled with the board tomorrow. They want to discuss your future with the company." Marcus's stomach dropped. He had known this was coming. The tension had been building for weeks, and now the board was making their move. They wanted to oust him. He could feel it in his bones. "Thanks for letting me know," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "I'll be there." After hanging up, Marcus sat back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, trying to find some semblance of clarity. He had worked so hard to get to this point. He had climbed the corporate ladder, fought for every inch of success. But now everything was unraveling before him. He thought about the conversation he had with Tony, the janitor who had started this whole journey of transformation. He thought about the way Tony's tears had opened his eyes to the truth that he could no longer ignore. But now, the very people he had trusted, the people who had been by his side for years, were turning their backs on him. They didn't see what he saw. They didn't understand the importance of the change he was fighting for. It was then that the weight of everything hit him. This wasn't just about business. It wasn't just about strategy or profits or even the company. This was about his legacy, about the kind of man, the kind of leader he wanted to be remembered as. The next day, Marcus walked into the boardroom, the atmosphere thick with tension. The board members were already seated, their faces stern and unreadable. James was at the head of the table, and Marcus could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Marcus," James began, his tone colder than it had ever been. "We've been discussing your leadership and the direction you've been taking this company. The board feels that your focus on empathy and people-first values is distracting from our core mission. We've seen a decline in employee productivity, and our profit margins have started to shrink." Marcus clenched his jaw. The words stung, but they weren't entirely unexpected. The board wasn't interested in the human side of the business. They were only interested in results. "I understand your concerns," Marcus said, his voice steady, though his heart was pounding. "But I'm not willing to turn my back on the people who make this company what it is. If we can't prioritize our employees, then what are we really building here?" Another board member, Sarah, spoke up. "Marcus, you're not seeing the bigger picture. We're a business, not a charity. We can't afford to lose sight of our bottom line. You're asking us to risk everything for an ideal, and frankly, we're not sure it's worth the cost." The words felt like a slap to the face, but Marcus refused to back down. He had seen the truth, he couldn't unsee it. The people who worked for him were not just cogs in a machine. They were human beings, each with their own struggles, their own lives, and he couldn't just pretend they didn't matter. "I'm not asking you to abandon our mission," Marcus said, his voice rising slightly. "I'm asking you to see our employees as the heart of that mission. If we don't invest in them, if we don't show them that they matter, then everything we've built will crumble. You can't keep treating people like assets and expect them to give their best. You can't just push them to their limits without considering the human cost. That's not how you build a sustainable company." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Marcus could feel the resistance, the disbelief. They weren't ready to hear this, but he had no choice but to speak the truth. "We've been operating under the wrong model for too long," he continued, his voice firm with conviction. "This is bigger than profits. This is about creating a legacy, a company that values its people, that values empathy, that values human connection. And I will fight for that vision, no matter what." James leaned forward, his face tight with frustration. "Marcus, you're making a huge mistake. If you continue down this path, we may have no choice but to let you go." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He had known this was a possibility, but hearing it from James, hearing it from the people who had been his colleagues, his friends, made it feel real. And yet, even as the weight of the situation bore down on him, Marcus knew one thing for sure. He couldn't back down now. He had already come too far. "I'm not afraid to take the consequences," Marcus said, his voice unwavering. "But I believe in this, and I won't stop fighting for what's right." The meeting with the board had left Marcus reeling. The tension in the room was suffocating, each word a heavy blow that landed squarely on his chest. For the first time, he was faced with the possibility of losing it all, the company, his career, and the vision he had worked so hard to build. As he walked out of the boardroom, the weight of the decision ahead of him felt like a leaden weight pressing on his shoulders. He could feel the eyes of his colleagues on him, the hushed whispers as he passed through the hallways. The fallout from the meeting had already begun. It was only a matter of time before word got out. He had built his empire on the idea of success, on being the best, on winning at all costs. But now, in the face of opposition, Marcus was beginning to question what success really meant. Was it just about profits? Was it just about numbers? Or was there more to it than that? Marcus paused outside his office, taking a deep breath before entering. The sound of his shoes echoing in the hallway seemed louder than usual. The silence that greeted him when he stepped inside his office felt oppressive, like the walls were closing in. He sat down at his desk and stared at the papers in front of him. Proposals, contracts, board reports. These were the things he had focused on for years, the things that had consumed his life. But now they seemed meaningless. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. A text from James. "We need to talk. Now." Marcus knew what that meant. James was no longer just questioning his decisions. He was drawing a line in the sand. The board had made their position clear, and now James was signaling that it was time for a final showdown. He stood up, walking to the door, and stepped into the hallway. The weight of the moment was suffocating. Every step felt heavier than the last. He had never been afraid of a challenge before, but this felt different. The meeting with James was set for that afternoon. When Marcus arrived, he found James already seated at the conference table, his posture tense, his arms crossed. The air between them felt thick with unspoken words. "James," Marcus said, his voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of uncertainty. "What's this about?" James didn't respond right away. He just stared at Marcus for a long moment, his gaze sharp, like he was sizing him up. "Marcus, you're making a mistake," James said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "You're asking for a level of change that this company is not ready for. And frankly, I'm not sure you're ready for it, either." Marcus felt his heart tighten. "I can't just sit back and watch this company continue to run on autopilot. We can't just focus on profits at the expense of our people. That's not sustainable." James sighed, rubbing his temples. "I get it. I do. But what you're proposing is too much too soon. We're talking about overhauling the entire culture of the company, changing the way we do business. You can't expect that to happen overnight." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "I never expected it to happen overnight. But it has to start now. If we don't start now, it'll be too late." James's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "I want to help you, Marcus. I always have. But I need to know, you're willing to lose everything for this, aren't you? Your career, this company, everything." Marcus paused. The question hung in the air like a weight pressing down on him. Am I willing to lose everything? He thought about his family, his friends, his employees. He thought about Tony, the janitor who had shown him the reality of the company's culture. He thought about the countless others who had been overlooked, who had been working in silence, doing their jobs without ever feeling truly seen. "Maybe that's the price of change," Marcus said slowly, his voice steady but filled with a quiet resolve. "Maybe it's not about keeping everything I've built. Maybe it's about building something new, something that actually matters." James was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed and looked down at the table. "I can't tell you what to do, Marcus, but I can't support this vision if you're not willing to listen to the risks. If you're not willing to compromise, to meet us halfway, then I don't see how we can move forward." Marcus felt a pang of sadness. He had known this was coming. James was his friend, his mentor, but the truth was, they were no longer on the same page. The gap between them had grown too wide. "I can't compromise on this, James," Marcus said quietly, his voice filled with certainty. "This is what I believe in. This is what I want to build. If that means I lose everything, then so be it. I'd rather lose it all for what's right than hold onto a legacy I no longer believe in." James didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the city below. When he spoke again, his voice was soft, almost wistful. "You're making a mistake, Marcus. But if you believe this is the right thing to do, then you have my support. For what it's worth, I'll be there with you, until the end." Marcus nodded, his heart heavy but resolute. He had made his decision. The path ahead was uncertain, and the consequences were unknown. But he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to turn back. The days following his conversation with James were filled with an eerie stillness. Marcus had expected some backlash, but the silence from his leadership team and the board was deafening. It felt like the calm before the storm, a storm he knew was coming but didn't know how to prepare for. The weight of his decision was starting to settle in. The company he had built, the empire that had defined his life, was now on the brink of collapse. His colleagues, once his allies, were distancing themselves from him, and the board had begun making moves behind the scenes. The emails, the phone calls, the meetings, they were all leading to the same conclusion. Marcus knew that the next few days, maybe even the next few hours, would determine his future. The board was pushing for his resignation. They had given him an ultimatum: compromise on his vision for a people-first company, or face the consequences. And the consequences were coming fast. He sat alone in his office late that evening, staring out the window at the city lights below. The once vibrant city that had represented success and opportunity now seemed distant, like a place he could no longer reach. His thoughts were heavy, filled with doubt. Had he made the right choice? The sound of his phone buzzing on his desk snapped him out of his reverie. He glanced at the screen. It was a message from his assistant. The board meeting is scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. They're making their final decision. Marcus took a deep breath and set the phone down. He had known this moment was coming, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. The reality of what he had done was starting to sink in. This wasn't just about his company, it was about his legacy. His entire career had been built on the idea of success, of rising to the top. But now everything was falling apart. And in that moment, Marcus wondered if he had lost his chance to make a difference. The next morning, Marcus walked into the boardroom, the tension palpable. The board members were already seated, their faces grim. They didn't need to say anything. Marcus could see it in their eyes. The decision had already been made. "Marcus," James said, his voice cold, "the board has reached a conclusion. We believe that your vision, while admirable, is not aligned with the future direction of the company. We can't continue to support you in your efforts to overhaul the culture in such a drastic way." Marcus felt his heart drop. The words were what he had expected, but hearing them out loud still felt like a gut punch. "We've given you every opportunity to reconsider, to meet us halfway," James continued, his gaze unwavering. "But we believe that the direction you're taking this company is too risky, and we can't afford to lose any more time." Marcus stood in front of the board, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The weight of their decision hung heavy in the air. This was it. He had fought so hard for change, for a future where people were valued, but now it was slipping through his fingers. "Are you asking me to step down?" Marcus's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. An edge he hadn't expected to feel. James looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus could see the regret in his eyes. "Yes, we are asking you to step down." The words hit Marcus like a tidal wave. He had been preparing himself for this moment, but now that it was here, he felt a sense of disbelief. This was the culmination of everything he had worked for, the choice he had made to put his vision above everything else. And now it was all coming crashing down. For a moment, Marcus couldn't speak. He stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. But then, something inside him shifted. This wasn't the end. Couldn't be. He had made a choice. He had stood by his beliefs, and while the consequences were painful, he knew that he couldn't compromise now. He had to stay true to himself. "You can ask me to leave," Marcus said finally, his voice firm. "But I won't back down from what I believe in. This company, this world, it needs leaders who are willing to make tough choices, who are willing to fight for what's right, even when the road is hard." The room was silent, the board members exchanging glances, clearly taken aback by his response. James spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "Marcus, you're a visionary, but sometimes visions come with consequences, and sometimes those consequences are too high to ignore." "I've accepted the consequences," Marcus said, his voice filled with conviction. "But I won't stop fighting for the people who deserve better. If I have to leave this company to do that, then I will. But my mission isn't over. It's just beginning." With those words, Marcus turned and walked out of the boardroom. The door shut behind him with a soft click, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of clarity. The day after the board's decision, Marcus stood in the middle of his now empty office. The shelves, once filled with awards, plaques, and corporate memorabilia, were bare. The desks were empty, and the soft hum of the air conditioning was the only sound that filled the room. It felt surreal, like stepping into a void, a place between two worlds. He had made the choice to leave, but it hadn't been an easy decision. He could still hear the words of the board members echoing in his mind. They had offered him a way out, a compromise, but Marcus knew he couldn't walk that path. Not now. Not after everything he had seen, everything he had fought for. He had lost his place at the helm of the company, but he had gained something much more valuable: his integrity. His vision for a people-first world hadn't been destroyed. It was simply waiting for him to find the right way forward. Marcus walked out of his office, taking one last look at the building that had defined so much of his life. But as he stepped into the elevator and descended to the lobby, something shifted inside him. The weight of the decision was still heavy, but the sense of loss was fading. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in front of a group of people. This time it wasn't a boardroom. It wasn't a room filled with suits and briefcases. This was a group of people who had seen what he was trying to do, who believed in the same vision. They were ordinary workers, entrepreneurs, and activists, all united by the belief that businesses could be better, that companies could be more than just profit-driven entities. They were there to help build something new, something better. "Thank you for being here today," Marcus began, standing in front of the crowd with a newfound sense of purpose. "This is the beginning of something different. It's not just about business. It's about creating a world where people are valued, where the human side of business is just as important as the numbers, where empathy, compassion, and respect are the foundations of every company." The room was filled with nods of agreement. These were people who had been ignored, overlooked, or marginalized by traditional corporate systems. They weren't just employees. They were people with stories, with dreams, and with the same drive that had once fueled Marcus's rise. But now they weren't here to chase after profits. They were here to chase after something that truly mattered. "I lost everything," Marcus continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But in doing so, I gained something far more valuable. I gained the knowledge that I can make a real difference. And together we can build something that lasts. Something that will change the way the world sees business." As the words left his mouth, Marcus knew that this was just the beginning. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't know where this journey would lead him. But one thing was certain: he wasn't going to stop fighting for the people who needed to be seen, for the ones who deserved better. 1 year later, Marcus stood on a stage at a conference, speaking to a room full of industry leaders, entrepreneurs, and changemakers. His company, though still in its early stages, was growing. It wasn't the billion-dollar empire he had once led, but it was something far more meaningful. It was a company built on values of empathy, inclusion, and respect for all people, regardless of their role. 2 years ago, I lost everything, Marcus began, his voice calm and reflective. But what I've learned since then is that sometimes losing everything is the best thing that can happen to you. It forces you to reassess what truly matters. The room was silent, every ear tuned to his words. Marcus had become a symbol of a new way of doing business, one that didn't prioritize profits at the expense of people, one that understood that success was about more than just numbers. "When I first started my journey, I thought success was all about climbing the corporate ladder," Marcus continued. "But now, I know that true success is about the impact you make on the lives of the people around you. It's about creating spaces where people feel heard, seen, and valued." The applause from the audience was immediate and loud, but Marcus wasn't done yet. He knew that the real work was still ahead. The company he was building wasn't perfect, and there were challenges every day. But he had built something real, a company that treated people with dignity, that valued empathy, that sought to make a difference. "I'm not here to tell you that everything is easy," Marcus said, his voice filled with resolve. "I'm here to tell you that it's worth it. It's worth fighting for. It's worth making sacrifices for. If we want to change the world, we need to start by changing the way we do business." The crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation, and Marcus felt a sense of pride well up inside him. This was what he had fought for. This was what he had risked everything for. And it was working. As Marcus left the stage and walked backstage, his assistant approached him with a smile. "You did it, Marcus. They believe in you. They believe in the vision." Marcus nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "No, we did it," he corrected her. "This is just the beginning. There's more work to do. But we've shown that it's possible. We've shown that business can be about more than just profits. It can be about people." And as Marcus looked out over the audience, he knew that the legacy he had once feared losing was now more secure than ever. He had fought for a vision, and though the path had been difficult, it had led him to a place where he could make the kind of change he had always dreamed of. A legacy that wasn't built on money or power, but on the people who made everything possible. This is the end of Marcus's story, but it's just the beginning of a larger movement. Like this video if you believe in the power of people-first business. Comment with your thoughts on Marcus's legacy, and subscribe to follow more stories of transformation and change.